We live on a flammable island with much of our vegetation primed to burn. In fact, for more than 40,000 years, Tasmanian Aboriginal people have been skillfully burning the landscape. And while fire is always a disturbance, it's not always a disaster. In this film, we explore how art and science respond to fire in Tasmania, and we marvel at the beauty from the ashes. We're about to take a journey looking through scientific and artistic lenses at Tasmania's 2019 summer bushfires. In our journey, we learn that artists and scientists both bring very differently trained eyes to burnt landscapes. But we also learn that both visit sites, both observe, both document, and both reflect. When landscapes burn, science offers us the ability to respond and plan. In the aftermath of Tasmania's summer bushfires, science is used to predict how ecosystems will recover.
Yeah, look, science is incredibly important, particularly as in Australia today we're seeing more frequent fire in general and also different types of fire of new intensities. So fire regimes are definitely changing, and that's meaning that how fire impacts landscapes and vegetation communities is also changing all the time, and we really need science to get in there so we can understand what's happened and how communities might be recovering or not recovering, and anything we might need to do to take care of particular species or communities.
What do we see through a scientist's eyes?
I think first and foremost, as a scientist, you look at these landscapes with curiosity. You're really trying to understand what's happened here and how are things coming back, what is growing back, what's not, and what might we need to do to help.
The response of artists to Tasmania's bushfires provokes emotive reaction. Art has the power to move audiences, compelling us to reflect on the vulnerability of the land and our connection with it.
Artists offer individual emotive responses. They have personal connections to the places that they're depicting. A lot of artists go to the places and spend time in that landscape. They use materials that might be sourced from that place. It's really nice to have the two perspectives alongside the very important scientific data, but those raw individual moments that artists have captured give us a different response and a nice personal reflection. And artists are often looking at different things in the landscape, and they're thinking about the textures and the surfaces and the remnants of what's left behind after a bushfire in quite a different way, and often quite a poetic way as well.
This is the Tasmanian Land Conservancy's Five Rivers Reserve in the Central Plateau. Spanning 11,000 hectares, it sits adjacent to World Heritage Wilderness and Tratha Makuminya, a protected area owned and managed by the Tasmanian Aboriginal Centre. Five Rivers encompasses open grassland, old-growth forest, woodlands and endangered sphagnum moss beds. In January 2019, the Great Tier Fire cut a swathe through Five Rivers, prompting scientists like Rowena to respond immediately.
There's a lot of species obviously at Five Rivers, and the fire impacts different species differently. As a kind of a broad and general statement, the fire at Five Rivers was fairly low intensity and quite patchy. Yeah, I think if you take it as a general event on our reserve, the fire was actually quite benign, if not good, but we've just got these areas and species that are of concern because they have these really specific needs.
While much of Five Rivers is recovering well, other areas are still very vulnerable. Of greatest concern are the stands of Mayo cider gums, named for their sweet edible sap.
Cider gums are a really good example of why discussions around fire are more complicated than just fire good or fire bad. So as a eucalypt, it obviously is adapted to being in a fire-prone landscape, and fire can often be quite good in terms of stimulating new growth. When we're talking about an impact of a fire, it's not just about the impact of that specific fire, it's about how that fire and the impacts of that fire interacting with all of these other threats over the next few decades.
However, Out of these ashes, a beauty slowly emerges. The understory is first to unfurl. Wildflowers, grasses and ferns, taking nutrients from the ashes and reaching for the light.
And we're actually seeing some really nice flashes of new growth coming up in lots of places. Some of the marshlands are just looking gorgeous with lots of orchids and little wildflowers coming through.
So when you see the regrowth, how does that make you feel?
It's actually beautiful.
Artists like Tim Coad have also responded to Tasmania's fire-ravaged landscapes. He felt compelled to head to the far south, to the forests around Geeveston, devastated by the summer bushfires.
Yeah, I got down there like straight after the bushfires pretty much, and it was actually still very, very hot on the ground down there. I'd be walking around and there's just ash everywhere. It was like smouldering away. And as you actually walk on the ground, it'd crumble underneath you.
Tim's dark, broody works are printed on large aluminium plates. Jagged, wild lines slashed into the metal reflects a burnt landscape scarred by fire. And as an artist, what were the emotions that you were trying to evoke in your works?
I guess there's that sense of stability on the surface of these landscapes, but then as you walk on them, they crumble underneath you.
So there's a fragility plus a strength, almost a duality.
There's a strength, there's a fragility, there's an endurance as well in a landscape.
These prints evolved into Beneath the Sticks, the electrifying work that Tim entered in last year's prestigious Hadley's Art Prize.
That work was about trying to communicate that emotional response that I got when I first saw these bushfire damaged environments. I was collecting like nails and old wires and all just kinds of detritus that were just in the ground that got uncovered in the bushfires, and started using those as tools, as drawing tools. Here's a piece of old wire, and anything with like a sharp sort of sharp edge to it, really.
Other artists were also inspired by Tasmania's fire-ravaged landscape for their entries in the 2019 Hadley's Art Prize. In Megan Walsh's evocative Land of Fire and Flood, we witness blazing branches turbulently twisting in mirrored arcs over smoky haze. Nigel Hewitt uses wood and ash collected from bushfire sites to create his soft, yet sombre understory. Now on permanent display at Hadley's Orient Hotel, it depicts a long-lost Tasmanian scene where the loss of land is equated with the loss of the thylacine. Artist Robyn Mayo looks to her beloved Central Plateau.
When she depicted the Central Plateau, she'd been sketching it for many months, and she was just devastated by the fires and went back and witnessed that change, and her drawing transformed as a result of that. But what we see in her drawing are traces of hope and life coming back, and there are butterflies recolonising after the fire, and there's regrowth in amongst the broken jawbones and things. So it's a beautiful picture of hope after a fire.
Collectively, these artworks speak of the depth and complexity of our response to burnt landscapes, feelings of hope, despair, beauty and regrowth. But the ecological story is just as complex. As new life emerges, it competes, transforms, and may be subject to new bouts of fire, starting the cycle of disturbance once more. As we move into the future, we need to ask, how will art and science help us live with fire? And will we continue to find this beauty from the ashes?
I think as scientists, we're always looking at these landscapes with fascination and curiosity, really trying to understand, so what's happened here and how are things responding, what's coming back and how. As scientists too, we're definitely also, just like artists, I think, looking for beauty in the ashes around us.